clip. Oh, that sounds like shit. How's it going, guys? Welcome to the show. Well, my 924S came from the factory with these metric 4x6 style Blaupunkt speakers in the rear sail panels. And as you can see, they were completely deteriorated. You know, back in the day, Blaupunkts used to be considered pretty nice stereo components.
You did not just do that. That is a Blaupunkt! You owe me a Blaupunkt!
The speakers in the doors were worn out too, so I started by purchasing these inexpensive Pyle brand speakers to try them out in the doors in place of the speakers that originally came there. But the tweeter in the center of these stuck out too far to fit underneath the factory grills, so for the time being I stuck them in the back. But because I eventually wanted some better sounding speakers for the back, and Porsche did me a huge favor by stamping a nice big hole in the factory sheet metal for some larger speakers, we're going to make some adapters and install a decent set of 6.5-inch JBL component speakers in the rear. So let's pull this speaker and this plate out and see what I come up with. I looked for a decent set of speakers and ran across this deal on Amazon. They were about half the price they normally were and came with a free phone mount to boot, so I ordered these up. I also ordered these NVX silicone ring gaskets, rubber baby buggy bumpers. They're going to sit underneath the speakers like that and seal up against the metal. And then I also ordered an ABS cutting board to make my adapters out of. These JBLs end up turning out pretty nice, but after doing this, if you're planning to put larger speakers in your Porsche, I'd probably recommend looking for a different set of speakers. These JBLs come with mounting rings that sit underneath the speaker and make them mount into the larger opening, but because the woofer itself is already a little thicker than how speakers are usually designed, I wasn't able to use those rings underneath the speakers. I think more conventional 6.5 or maybe even 6 3/4 inch speakers would actually fit a little bit better, and you might be able to find a set of speakers that will be able to use the existing mounting holes that are already there in the panel. But these JBLs are what I got, so we're going to make them work. The other thing about these speakers is they are component speakers. The tweeter that would normally be mounted in the center of the speaker comes separate, so you have to find a place to mount it. Plus, you need to find a place to mount the crossover and run the extra wiring. So if you're doing this mod, want to save yourself some time and don't care about the speaker being in a little bit different location, just get a two-way speaker. But in the end, with the way I mounted the tweeters, these component speakers end up filling the space left behind from the 4x6s quite nicely. So I guess it just comes down to how much time you want to spend on your project. The 4x6 is actually inset a little bit compared to the surface for the larger speaker. So I decided to make a panel that would fit down inside there, but also be the right thickness on the edge so the larger speaker could mount against it. The new speakers came with these plastic rings, and later I ended up finding out that they wouldn't work, but I originally cut them down to make them fit and then used them to drill the new holes for the JBLs. So I took a piece of cardboard from a case of Diet Coke, marked the holes and traced out the shapes I needed, then transferred and cut the panels out of this plywood sheeting. So the plan was to use these pieces of wood, bolt them to my ABS, and then cut around it to get the perfect shape. But after I cut out these wood panels first, I realized that they actually turned out pretty nice. And I even thought, you know, maybe I would just use these as the panels to fill that space. But afterwards I realized that it just wasn't ideal. I wanted to use the thicker and stiffer ABS because I'm going to be mounting the tweeters in the center of these panels. But I thought I'd explain why I took the time to paint the backs of them with that gray Plasta dip. Just thought I'd explain that in case you were wondering. Today is all about figuring out where I'm going to put these crossovers and wiring and stuff. I hope I've got all the connectors that I need. I think I've got everything that I need to do this job.
Oh, yuck. Did you know it's all the way around the corner and going down?
Yeah.
We have the problem. Now this year, I don't know what they're going to do. They can't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were breaking.
Here comes the city guy. It's coming out over here too,
yeah.
isn't it?
Warm, cold, really cold right here.
Whoa.
It's freezing cold.
Really?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
What are you saying oh for?
So you can
This
definitely.
is a new driveway. It's always good to have something like little I can throw at the beginning of my Porsche videos.
Porsches.
He said if he shuts it off and it quits leaking, it's our problem. So you just measured off the corner of the house, or how did you do it?
That's what we have a record of. So we've got like an aerial map that shows about roughly where they should be.
Oh yeah.
But then if we can't find it in that area, we can measure off and it'll tell us.
Oh, okay. Moment of truth.
Oh yeah. That'd be the beast. You are the beast master. You tamed it.
Oh, look at that. Whoa, it's deep. Holy crap. Oh, that white thing down there is the sewer pipe?
Yeah.
Is it? Is that it? Okie dokie. What's up, guys? So I took a break from working on my stereo for quite a while because I had to concentrate on some other stuff. Yeah, so we're gonna start finishing this stereo install. And I'm gonna pop the top. And I thought it was kind of funny, my sunroof has always been, not worked exactly right. That's a whole nother project we're gonna have to get to eventually. So I think in a future episode, or definitely in a future episode, we'll be redoing all that sunroof stuff. I needed a spot to mount the crossovers for the speakers, and I decided the best place to put them would be under the seats. So I pulled out the seat here, and you can see the subwoofer that I'm going to be adding to. I decided to put that in place first before I finish running the speakers. I haven't hooked it up yet, but I wanted to know where I could put the crossover and how I needed to run the wires. And then in a future episode, we'll hook up that subwoofer and see how this whole stereo sounds together. The stock speaker wire for the back speakers runs along the bottom of each door, underneath the plastic trim, then through a rubber grommet in the sail panel and up to the speakers. So I pulled that wire out, shortened it up a little bit, and then connected that to the input on the crossover. I pulled the carpeting back there alongside the seat where I had already had it glued down, and then I'm going to feed all of the wires back through that same spot. I had to run 2 wires from the crossover up to the sail panel for the woofer, and then the other second wire goes to the tweeter. So I cut 2 pieces of wire, I covered them with that wire loom that I had from Amazon, and then I also covered the stock speaker wire with some of that wire loom also. After I had the wires cut and covered with the braiding, then I ran all the wires back through the same spot. So they all were going underneath the carpeting where they go up into the door ledge there. And then the 2 wires run along the door edge where the stock speaker wire used to be. I ran the wire for the woofer up through the grommet where the stock speaker wire was. And the wire for the tweeter I ran up higher and then up through a second grommet that they have higher up on top that's closer to where the tweeter is going to be mounted. I decided to just bend that wire around the subwoofer, and then I put my crossover there behind the subwoofer because basically that's kind of where it was at its lowest point so the seat wouldn't hit it. And then also I could get to the button on top of the crossover easily if I wanted to change the setting for the tweeter. And then eventually I tie all those wires that I ran around the subwoofer together. And then once I had that situated, I re-glued the carpeting down on top of where it goes up into the door sill. I used these gold plated connectors for the ends of my speaker wires, and then here I'm just putting them on the end of the woofer wire and putting some heat shrink on the end there to hold the braiding in place. I want my car to be as quiet on the inside as it can be, so before I put the speaker in, I got in there and cleaned off the overspray cavity wax that Porsche used inside of that sail panel. And then I cut some pieces out of the soundproofing that I bought and used previously on the car. And then I put that soundproofing up inside the panel, and I also added a piece on top of the wheel well down inside the sail panel there.
Transmissible in animals, and that the probability of a human transmitted virus is very unlikely. That puts additional constraints.
Then I put the seat back in, straightened out those wires that ran underneath that plastic piece a little bit. There you can see where the crossover is underneath the seat. I just want to make sure that this wire can be run along here and this cover will be able to snap back down. And then snap the plastic door sill back in place. So this is a cutting board that I got from Amazon. Thing is, it's thick, so I have to find out if I can grind on it without it like melting. I did a test and it turns out it is possible to grind on it. It does melt too, but I could get away with grinding on it and then just sort of work with the melting. And it turned out the hacksaw cut through it pretty easily too, so I decided to just go ahead and make my adapters. So I'm using those wood pieces I cut out as a pattern. The wood is rigid enough so I can run my hacksaw blade around it and get the shape of the plastic pretty close and then just do some grinding on it afterwards. So I screwed the wood down to the ABS cutting board, put it in the vise, and cut around it. So I screwed the two halves together here, and then I found where I wanted my tweeter to sit, and then I used the center hole in the mount to find the center of both of the pieces so that they'd be in the same spot on each side. They give you two different style of mounts to choose from for the tweeters. One, you have to drill a hole through whatever you're mounting it to, and these ones are actually made to like sit on top of whatever you're attaching it to. And I decided to use this style because rather than drilling a hole all the way through, what I'm going to do is inset this style, and then that way I still have some material on the back side that will keep this panel from flexing, even though it might not, even if I was to drill a hole all the way through it. But I decided to do it this way, even though it was a little bit harder. I thought it created a little bit better of an end product. I took them apart and I drilled my original hole for both of the wires to go through. I found a drill bit that was just a little bit larger than the plugs that I need to feed through it. Marked the location on both pieces where those wires needed to pass through, and then took my drill bit and drilled a couple of holes. It's kind of satisfying drilling into that ABS.
Without that
And then I got a 1.5-inch paddle drill bit out and I started carving into the ABS plastic, not all the way through because I wanted my mounts to be inset, but not go all the way through the panel, because I figured that way with some material left there, the panel would be stiffer and I'd end up with a better result. I needed the bottom of the hole to be flat, so I got out that stone on my Dremel there and I started grinding down the bottom of that hole. The thing is it also sort of melted the plastic at the same time, but it actually worked out pretty good because there was kind of a big hole left in the very center of the hole from the tip of that paddle drill bit, and I was able to sort of grind and then melt and push the plastic back into that hole at the same time. So I ended up with a pretty flat bottom, and I filled up the hole that was left from the tip of that drill bit. After that, I took the square end of my file and I just spent some time really scraping and shaping the bottom of that hole to make it as flat as I could get it. And by the time I was done, that mount really sat nice and tight down inside of there. It didn't rock back and forth and it looked pretty good. And then I just took some sandpaper and cleaned up around the edges. The screws I used to mount these were stainless steel with a countersunk head, so I needed to have a little bit of a countersink on these panels for those screws to fit into. I went around and just by hand put the countersink in. Don't do it with a power drill because the drill bit will grab and it'll just bore right through the plastic. Just do it by hand. I used 2 of the 3 holes inside the mount to screw the mount to the panels. I just picked a size that had a big enough head to hold on to the panel, but yet wasn't too big so that I wasn't drilling such big holes in the thin part of the plastic. And then they were longer than I wanted them to be, so I screwed the screws down until they were almost tight. I put the panels in the vise, and then motherless goat! Accidentally hacked into my finger. Which kind of sucked, but so then I finished cutting off the screws. And then I put a band-aid on. Actually, it didn't bleed. I think I only went through a couple of layers of skin. I think she loves me. I'm just gonna tighten this down and put the tweeters in. I took a drill bit and cleaned up the hole that the wires go through there before I did this, but when I went to go put the tweeters in, you push them in and then you sort of twist them and they lock in that way. But the thing is I figured out that they wouldn't go in all the way because of the leads or whatever you call them that are sticking out of the bottom of the tweeter where the wires are soldered on. They actually stuck out just a little too far and they were hitting the bottom of the hole. So I ended up having to take the mounts back out and then get in there with a Dremel and carve away some material to make room for the ends of those wires. And then once I did that, the tweeters went right into the mount. You stick them in and kind of twist them and they lock in place. And they look pretty good. Maybe I'll put some hot glue or something in here. Baby, takes like Rocky smile. Takes like Rocky, baby. Make me crawl extra mile. I think I'm gonna squirt some silicone in this edge and just kind of smear it in there. And put some probably back here in the wires. So I wanted to protect the wires as they pass through the plastic and make sure they were mounted solidly. So I took out some silicone, and then since I was doing that, I decided to tape around the tweeter and smear some silicone into the edge so it would actually go around the outside of the edge and really make the tweeter be held in there, I guess, nice and tight. It's kind of messy, but it did work out all right. And then I smeared some silicone into the hole in the back where the wires pass through. I just taped the wires so that the wires were kind of in the center of that hole and then smeared the silicone in there. And then I let the silicone get hard. And after that, I took the tape off, cleaned them up a little bit, and then started putting them in the car. So here's a look at how I ran the wires on the driver's side. That's the wire for the tweeter running up a little farther and then going through the same grommet that the defrost wire goes through. And then going down a little bit, there's the woofer wire going through the original grommet for the main speaker. And then the wires just run along the doors and then down to the crossover underneath the seat there on the driver's side. So then I just straightened out the metal underneath there a little bit and started mounting these tweeters. I cleaned up the area underneath there with some alcohol. And then there I'm just pulling the wires out, getting ready. And I decided to put some silicone underneath there. I probably didn't need to, but the metal was a little nicked up and I wanted to protect it. Plus, I thought it just would create an extra good gasket seal underneath there to hold everything in place. So I figured why not? And then I just screwed those panels in place. After that, I plugged in the wires. I probably should have put shrink tubing on the end of these wire connectors because those gold-plated connectors are kind of exposed. I just wrapped them with some tape to protect it, but shrink tubing probably would have been better. And then I left enough wire loom to cover all the wiring after I had it plugged together so that I could feed it all the way up to the back of the tweeter. And then I just fed that down the wires and then fed the wires into the grommet and plugged it in place. Originally, I was planning on using these rings underneath there because they're larger. They create a larger area to bolt to the metal. That's why I've got all those holes drilled in the one side. But I tested the panels with those rings and everything, and they ended up sticking out just a little too far. And I just used the speakers without them. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier about looking for slightly larger speakers. I probably would have picked a different set of speakers if I had known that I wasn't going to be able to use the plastic rings to mount these, but you know, you live and you learn, and you guys get to learn from these videos, hopefully, so there you go. Alright, so you might have noticed this one screw here is obviously like on the edge of where I ground out for the lip of the speaker. And I ended up making the ridge there wider than I needed to. So what I'm going to do here is I've got this taped off, and I'm just going to take my Dremel and I'm going to carve out around that screw a little bit, and then I'm going to use a different style screw that isn't countersunk. And we're going to lower the level of that screw so it's on the same level as the notch that I made for the edge of the speaker. But at least it's like sunken down now, so it's on the same level. I'm going to put this screw in here and then call it good. So I put the screw in there and then started mounting the speakers. I put the rubber ring in there and then connected the wires. You could see that foam pad behind there. That came with the NVX rubber rings there. And so I stuck those behind each speaker just to kind of reflect some of the sound and absorb some of the sound too. There you go. Not bad if I do say so myself. Let's see how they sound. Well, there it is, guys. 6.5-inch JBL component speakers and a 924S Porsche. Thanks for watching the show. If you haven't already, it'd be really awesome if you hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. It definitely helps out my channel in the algorithm. And yeah, hope you guys are doing good. Thanks for watching the show, guys. Be sure to check back for new episodes of Project Porsche. See you next time.
Both night and day of satisfied